Okay, we went way off left.
Too much pot tar.
way too much pod tar.
Just say that you like for that site and stuff. So, all right. So, welcome to another episode of Too Much Pod Tar as we continue our 30 teams and 30 pod series. And I have a Rays fan on today for our Rays portion of the show, and Rays fan Ken Filler, and he's from Tampa Bay, of course, and he writes for a site, Tampa Bay Pro Sports. He writes about all the Tampa Bay teams, the Lightning, the Rays, Buccaneers. So, yeah, welcome to the show, Ken.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be with you. Looking forward to a good baseball season.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Tomorrow is the first game. There's only one game tomorrow for spring training, but then Saturday is when every team plays. So it's going to be exciting. Excited to get back into it.
Absolutely, and it should be real interesting this year with the Yankees and the Rays. I read some comments from the Rays owner Stuart Sternberg over the last couple of days, and he thinks the Rays can give the Yankees a run for their money with their improved offense that they picked up during the offseason and with the five-man rotation, everybody healthy. So it's going to be a great run this season in baseball, especially in the American League East.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think the Rays are the Yankees' only competition this year. The Red Sox after trading Mookie and Price, I think they're going to be out of it. So it's going to be I think it's just going to be us and you guys.
I would agree with that. The Red Sox may even struggle to get a wild card spot. So I agree. It's going to be the Yankees and Rays for the 1-2 spots there in the American League East.
Yeah, and I think whoever doesn't win the East is going to get the first wild card. So I could see another Rays, maybe A's wild card game or something like that. But I mean, I think the A's even have a shot at winning the AL West because I think the Astros are going to. I actually have been saying a lot that I think the Astros missed the playoffs this year just because of everything that's been going on. They're going to have so much pressure on them to.
Yes, absolutely. I think the Astros are going to really struggle this year, and the Angels, they improved their team with the addition of Hector Rondon. So, it's going to be a good competition in the West, between the Astros, the A's, and the Angels.
Yeah, and even the Rangers have, they've improved, so they've been they can do some things this year.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you don't know really how it's going to shake out. Injuries can crop up, and you never know how things are going to go once you get into the the stretch run in the heart of the baseball season. But the team's definitely improved. A lot of good competition, and we'll just have to see how it shakes out come September and October.
Yes, I think it's going to be a really exciting season this year. And as you mentioned with the Rays, their additions to their lineup, they have they traded for Hunter Renfroe. That was in the Tommy Pham trade, I believe, right? That's what it was.
Yes, they parted with Pham. Yeah, picked up Renfroe.
Yeah, and then they also got Jose Martinez. I think that's a pretty good addition. He's going to be sliding into their DH role pretty much.
Yeah, Martinez will DH primarily. He can also play in the field, outfield, and a little first base. He did have a down year last year offensively. He only hit 10 homers. In 2017, he had hit 272 with 29 homers and driven in close to 80 runs. So the Rays are counting on him getting back to that 25, 30 home run potential that he had with the Cardinals a couple of seasons ago. But he definitely brings a good offensive punch to the Rays. And a move that kind of went under the radar was the signing of the Japanese slugger Yoshi Tsutsugo. They picked him up for $12 million. They signed him to a 2-year contract. They had to pay Yokohama, his team in the Japanese league, $4 million to sign him. But he brings an offensive punch as well. And they're going to use him in the DH role as well. So with Renfroe's 33 home runs, the addition of Martinez and Satsugo, the Rays think that they have improved their offense tremendously this offseason.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and then that's been kind of a thing that they haven't really had as much of. Like their pitching has been what's kind of pushed them to be like in the hunt for the American League East, but like the last couple of years. But they've been kind of missing the bats. They've had a couple good ones, like last year Brandon Lau, Austin Meadows, they were good, and even G-Man Choi. Like, but they've kind of missed that one a couple of like big bats to make their lineup like good from top to bottom. Like I think that, and that's they finally can be able to get that. That's going to be good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. No question that the Rays did lose some offense. They lost Travis d'Arnaud, who had 16 home runs last season. Avi Garcia, he was a 20 home run guy.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Pham, Eric Sogard, all those guys were pretty good offensively. And Tommy Pham, I really hated to see the Rays lose him. He was a real spark plug for this team. Always seemed to get the key hit when you needed it. Good in the outfield, good presence in the locker room, and he's definitely going to be missed. But, when you get a chance to pick up a young kid like Hunter Renfroe, who had 33 home runs last year, those guys don't come cheap. So the Rays felt that they could, part with Pham, and Renfroe would be a good addition to the club, and they could upgrade offensively.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, obviously they're talking about their starters. There's, they have like Morton at the top, and he had a really good season last year. He was in the Cy Young race. And then Blake Snell, who had kind of a down year last year, but I think he can bounce back and have another kind of Cy Young type year. And then obviously Glasnow as well. Glasnow I think he'll be really solid this year. And then kind of go with like openers too. Obviously they've been going with that for a few years now. They're basically the team that started the whole opener thing.
Yeah, the Rays are really counting on having a healthy rotation this year. Morton was really the only starter that was healthy all of last season. And as you mentioned, he was one of the finalists, for the Cy Young Award. He went 16-6 with a 3 ERA. Snell and Glasnow were really hit hard by injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Glasnow went down in the middle of May, and he was one of the best pitchers in baseball at the time. He was 6-1 with a 1.78 ERA and was averaging 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. And if he can pitch a whole season and have those kind of numbers, that's going to be huge for the Rays. And then Blake Snell, as you mentioned, had a down year. He was hurt a good portion of the season. He has 6-8 mark and an ERA over 4, which is not like Blake Snell at all. Very disappointing season for him coming off the Cy Young Award-winning season. And then, as you mentioned, Yonny Chirinos and Ryan Yarbrough, those were the two guys that they kind of moved into the rotation as the openers. Listening to Kevin Cash yesterday, the Rays really have not decided yet fully if they're going to use that opener strategy or not this season. Cash said they'll probably wait until late March when things kind of settle down and they have a good feel of who's going to be on the team and in what role. But I would think that with everybody healthy, the Rays will go with a 5-man rotation with Chirinos and Yarbrough being the 4 and 5 guys.
Yeah, that would make sense. I think that's definitely a possibility where they go. And I think they still might end up, kind of going into that opener role sometimes, like not all the time, but I feel like they want to do that. Like since they've kind of always done that, like the last few years, I think that's just kind of where they're comfortable going with.
Yes, and they've had good success doing that. I mean, other teams even picked up on that strategy and employed it, late in the season. So I wouldn't discount the Rays, using that strategy at all, at some point during the season. But I think with the 5 guys healthy, I think they'll see, if those 5 guys can, get them to where they want to be at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think like injuries are always bound to happen at some point too. So that's kind of I think maybe if they have an injury or two, then they probably end up using it more. So I think that could end up being a possibility. Because I would hope that the top three guys don't get hurt, but it could end up happening again.
Yeah, it could. Injuries are always part of the game.
Yeah.
But the difference this year, I think, is the Rays made a trade at the deadline last year that kind of went under the radar. They picked up Trevor Richards and Nick Anderson from the Miami Marlins, and Anderson was lights out. The last 2 months of the season, he went 3-0 with 2 walks and 41 strikeouts with an ERA right around 2. And Richards, they used him in a spot starter too, and also out of the bullpen. So the Rays definitely have some guys that can step up into that opener or long man role. And let's not forget Brendan McKay, the two-way player that the Rays have. He was used primarily as a pitcher last season. They went 2-4 with a 5 ERA. Kind of struggled a little bit as the season wore on, but he had 56 strikeouts against 16 walks. And he can also DH and play the field. He didn't get a lot of opportunity. He only hit 200, but he did have a homer and an RBI. So I think McKay's a guy that the Rays like his versatility, and he'll definitely make the club, coming out of Port Charlotte.
Yeah, he's kind of like now that they have like a 26-man roster, he's kind of like one of those guys who can be. He can be the extra guy, but then he can hit and he can pitch. So that would be a good guy to have that can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned earlier, with injuries, you just can never, ever, have enough depth. And that's one thing that the Rays have really built over the last 3-4 years is depth. With the farm system that brought guys along, and it seems like when Snell or a Glasnow goes down, they always have somebody, ready to step in and take that next step to the big leagues. And, they got a lot of young kids on this roster. And, this year will be no different. I think they're ready. The Rays have the number one, minor league system, in baseball. And Brent Honeywell is a guy that's been off the radar. He should have been on the big league club by now, but he had 2 serious arm injuries that took him out of the mix in 18 and 19. So he's going to get a shot at some point this season, although he won't be ready for the big league club out of spring training. But an injury or 2, and I think you'll see Brent Honeywell in Tampa at some point during the season.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. He's got some good stuff. He's definitely somebody that can end up being in that rotation, and so that's definitely exciting there. I always love looking at prospects. So like, especially the last few years, prospects are always something I love seeing coming up. Especially watching them as they go from single A all the way up to triple A, and then eventually make their debuts.
Yes, and the Rays currently have the number one prospect in all of baseball, shortstop Wander Franco.
That's right.
Franco support Class A Port Charlotte last year. He'll probably begin this year at Double A. He's a 19-year-old kid, and he's progressing quickly. I saw him play a couple of times last season, and he has everything that you're looking for. He is quick. He is good defensively, a lot of pop off his bat. The question is, when he comes up, what are the Rays going to do with their shortstop, Willie Adames, who really improved defensively late in the season last year? So they're talking about maybe Franco going to play third, which would then create another problem. What do you do with Yandy Diaz, the current third baseman? So a lot of options, for the Rays, and those are good problems to have.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of those things that you can probably end up seeing a trade somewhere, maybe trading, Yandy or somebody to kind of open up a spot. But it depends on what happens with, like, how Franco progresses, of course, too. So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you don't know. Right now, everything it looks good, but as you know, we've seen a zillion guys that just, tear the cover off the baseball at the Double A, Triple A, and all levels of the minor leagues, and they get to the big leagues, and all of a sudden it's like, who is this guy? Right. This is the guy we saw at Triple A. So, you're exactly right. You just never know. A lot can happen. And, if Franco's the guy, then you got to start looking at, the possibility of maybe a trade or two.
Yeah. And to mention another pitching prospect, the one that was actually a throw-in, I think it was the throw-in for the Chris Archer trade, Shane Baz. I think he's projected to be a pretty good starting pitcher too. And I think he was like the player to be named later in that trade, which is kind of crazy because he was like a top prospect.
Yeah, when you think about that deal, I mean, let's just call it like it is. I mean, the Rays really fleeced the Pirates on that deal. I mean, getting Austin Meadows and then, Shane Baz. Baz is probably going to be a Double-A guy this year, maybe Triple-A. He pitched last year at Class A, but you're right. I mean, the Rays are really, really high on him and are counting on him, to be an integral part of that rotation, in the next couple of years. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. We're always making fun of the Pirates for that trade. Like, well, I don't know what they were thinking with that trade at all.
I don't think the fans in Pittsburgh know what they were thinking with that trade.
Yeah, it's just so like head scratching. Like, I have no idea. They don't know what they I don't think they even know what they're doing, really.
Yeah, and Archer's been the same guy in Pittsburgh that he was in Tampa. I mean, let's just face it. He, inconsistent, win some, lose some. ERA, mid threes to over 4. Yeah, gets hit early and often a lot of games. I mean, he's the same guy. So he'll eat some innings for you, but that's about the best you're going to get from Archer.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the pitchers and their rotation and their lineup, but it's kind of moving to like projecting where you think they end up finishing this year, like what win total. I think they can get up to 90 wins again. Last year, what was it? I forget what the record was.
96 they had last year.
Yeah, I think they can get around the same this year. And obviously, like we talked about, stay in that race in the American League East with the Yankees. I think the Yankees are end up with somewhere around like what they were last year, 100, 102, 103 wins. So
I would agree with that. Sternberg and the Rays front office, the opening day press conferences in Port Charlotte. It'll be disappointing if this Rays team doesn't win 90 games.
Yeah.
I mean, they are that high on them. I mean, 90 wins is just the base point for this team. And to be truthful, they should win more than 90 with the talent they have on this team. But I think they'll probably finish second behind the Yankees. I don't see them beating out the Yankees. I don't see them getting over 100 wins, which it's probably going to take to win the East. I mean, the Yankees won 102 or 103 games last year, and they improved their ball club, with the signing of Garrett Cole. So it looks like it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the Rays to get into the championship and win the East. But wild card spot, absolutely. There's no reason they shouldn't contend for a playoff spot and get one of those spots.
Yeah, I think I'm going to predict that they will end up getting the first wild card. I'll go with like a win above last year. I'll go with 97 wins, and they win that first wild card. And I guess I'll just throw a prediction of what the wild card game is going to be. I think it'll be Rays Angels. I'm going to say Angels get in finally. Mike Trout for only the second time in his career getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, that would be good. If Mike Trout gets that Angels team to the playoffs, people will start thinking of him, as a more legitimate, MVP candidate. Right now, people are. I think some of the talk on him is kind of, he hasn't won anything. He can't get his team into the playoffs. They don't win the big games, but he gets his team into the playoffs. I think that perception will definitely start changing on Mike Trout.
Yeah, definitely. Just for like us fans, we need to see something. We need Mike Trout in the playoffs just to see what he can do. Like, best player on the planet, and we need to see something more.
No, absolutely. He's one of the faces of the game. One of the best young stars in the American League, and when your best player isn't in the playoffs year in and year out, that can be a problem for baseball.
Yeah. And this is kind of like the marketing problem, like what baseball has now. I think if he gets into the playoffs, that would be huge for marketing because if you have to market your best player and like he's playing in the playoffs, it's definitely going to be huge.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, just think, how about Trout and Harper in a World Series, Angels and Nationals? What would that do for baseball from a marketing standpoint?
That would be incredible.
Yes, it would.
I mean, if it was like Angels Nationals too, like because Nationals have
Yes.
a lot of young guys, so that'd be good. But we'll see. I don't think the Angels are getting to the World Series this year
No,
anytime soon. I hope to see Mike Trout in the World Series at some point in his career, but I don't think it's going to happen within at least 3 or 4 years.
yeah, I would agree. I think American League West is too loaded with the A's and the Rangers giving them competition. I don't think they have enough to beat out Oakland, let alone Texas. So I think it'll be another 500 year, maybe a few games above this year for the Angels.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting in the American League, especially kind of like the divisions are kind of, except for like the AL West and the kind of AL East, kind of a little bit tighter with the Yankees and Rays. AL Central, I think the Twins are going to win that again. I think it's kind of AL is kind of like all chalk. I think a lot of the teams are going to win who won last year. Then maybe the West, the Astros don't win, and then with the Central, I think the Twins. I mean the Indians. I just don't think the Indians are going to be able to do enough this year, and I think they end up trading Lindor. They've been talking about it all offseason that he's the potential to be traded. So I just think that'll end up happening at some point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The Indians aren't going to provide a whole lot of competition for Minnesota when it comes to winning that division. The other team that's going to be interesting in that division to keep an eye on is the Chicago White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
They did make some improvements to that club, and they're pretty high on the White Sox. There in Chicago. So we'll have to see how that'll play out with them in Minnesota. I think Minnesota and Chicago will probably finish 1-2 in that division.
Yeah, I can see that too, but I just don't think the White Sox really will contend that much with it. I think they'll be probably 50, at least 15 games behind the Twins. I think the White Sox maybe I think this year they're improved for sure, but they'll be a year. I think they're a year away still. That the next year will be the year that they actually really contend for anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that because the Twins were one of the teams last year too that won 100 games, in the American League, and I can't see the White Sox, coming close to 100 wins. So with that competition, with Detroit being down and the Indians on the downslide, I think the White Sox finish second, but they're not going to come close to matching Minnesota's win total.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Yeah. So what did you say for the Rays prediction? You said Matt. Did you say a win total or no?
I'm going to go with 93.
93.
They won 96 last year. I'm going to go with 93 this year. They get a wild card spot. They'll finish behind the Yankees. I think they'll win the wild card game. Doesn't matter who they go up against. Oakland, the Angels. I think they win that. And then we'll see what happens once we get into the division series.
Yeah, last year they got close to getting past that series too. With they got to Game 5 against the Astros. It was pretty close.
Yeah, that was I think a surprising series. Everybody in baseball thought that was going to be a clean sweep, for Houston.
Yeah.
Of course, the Rays were under the radar all season, and then they get the wild card spot. They beat Oakland. Everybody starts paying attention to them. But even with all the injuries last year that the Rays had in their starting rotation, they still finished with the second best ERA in baseball, second best pitching. They had a 3.65 ERA. The Dodgers, with a 3.3 something ERA, was number one in all of baseball. But the Rays pitching, I mean, technically was better than the Astros when you look at the ERA breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So with everybody healthy, Snell improving, Glasnow a full season, Morton, having the same type of season he had last year, they're going to be a tough out for a lot of clubs.
Yeah, and it could end up being, well, if the Rays win the wild card, they'll probably end up playing the Yankees, because the Yankees looks like they're gonna be like the top seed. So that would be an interesting series if that's what it is.
Yeah, it would be, and half of Tampa's Yankee fans. I mean, you go to the Trop for a Yankee Rays game, and there's probably more Yankee fans there than there is Rays fans. Some games. Of course, the Yankees have their Class A team, and they have their spring training in Tampa, right across from Raymond James Stadium, and I'm sure that that's a big draw and brings a lot of Yankee fans in. But the area is just full of Yankee fans, so it's almost like a second home stadium when the Yankees come to Tampa. It really is.
Yeah, and playing the Trop is just like a bad place to play too, with like all those catwalks and all that stuff. Like, I think they can, if that ends up being the series, I think that Rays could definitely steal some games when they're at the Trop.
Yeah, the Rays have a good home field advantage there, but you're right. It's not a good baseball stadium. One of the worst in baseball, probably. I've been there many times. I don't mind it, but from a baseball purist standpoint, there's a lot of things that just don't work well in that ballpark for a major league stadium. And even though the Rays have had big seasons with win totals, 96 wins last year, they had 90 wins in 18. They just can't seem to draw anybody. I mean, they were next to last in attendance, 14,500, on average last year, and 14,300 the year before. The best season that they had attendance-wise was in 2009, and that was after the World Series run with they lost to the Phillies in 2008. That year they averaged 2009 23,100. They drew 1.87 million, which for a World Series team is not great numbers. So Tampa's always struggled with baseball, and thus Sternberg is promoting the split city idea with Montreal and Tampa, and that's not going over very well with the local fan base. But he seems to think that the commissioner and the owners are becoming more aligned and supporting that idea more. So we'll see how it goes. We got a lot of time yet, before anything is definitive on that deal. But that's one of the reasons why he's looking to split the games, is from a revenue and attendance standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's a really good idea to do that. It's just like, as you said, with their fan base, they don't really have much of a fan base. Like, they're trying to go over there, like the Montreal, to try to see. I think they're just doing that to try to test the waters there to see what kind of fans a team draws. I don't think they should do it with like a team that's already like a team like that's already like already there. Like, I think they do that. They should just. Well, I guess it makes sense to try to do it before making a new expansion team, but I don't know if the Rays are really the right team to do it. Just with kind of a low fan base. So, I don't know.
Well, in the annals of sports, there's been a couple of teams that have tried the two-city concept, and they were done in the 70s. The Kansas City Kings split their games with Omaha in the old, I believe it was the old NBA, early 70s, and now they're in Sacramento. Yeah. So you know how well that worked. And then in the ABA, the Virginia Squires in the early 70s, they played their games at different cities around the state of Virginia, and that didn't work. Yeah. So there's no basis in the past for no precedent that's saying that this idea is going to work. But Sternberg's hell-bent, and he thinks that this is going to be the future model for, pro sports teams. to make them viable that they can split their games with two cities. So he seems to think it'll work. He's got a lot of selling to do to convince folks that that's really the way to go.
Yeah, I think I don't see it working at all with this.
The problems that the big problem you're going to run into is, number one, who gets the playoff games.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, the proposal is February through mid-June, the Rays would play in Tampa or St. Petersburg at an outdoor stadium. That includes the 30 or 40 spring training games and then the first 2.5 months of the season. Then the team would go to Montreal and finish out the season in Montreal. That's the proposal that is on the table right now. But nothing has been discussed about, okay, if the team makes the playoffs, who gets the playoffs? What cities host? Are you going to put them in game 1 in Montreal, game 2 in Tampa? And not only the, who gets the playoff games, but one thing that really hasn't been discussed yet is think of the players. Okay, the players are going to have 2 residences. Half the season they'll live in Tampa, half the season in Montreal. The tax rate is much higher in Canada. There's no income tax in Florida. So you have a litany of issues that you got to work through to really convince people and make this a viable option. So you want the players and the players union to sign off on it. You got a lot of issues yet you got to work through.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't see it working out, like, just because, all the issues you have to work through and figuring out who plays where, like where you play for the playoffs and all that. So it's just, that doesn't really make sense to be in 2 cities. Like, you want to try to draw a fan base to just one city, and then they can't even do that right now, really. So it's like, I think they just need to relocate somewhere else besides, like, Tampa Bay is just kind of like something to do with, like, I don't know. I don't really know what the problem is with it, but I feel like it's just not the right, like, spot for them to be able to draw a fan base.
Yeah, well, they had a new stadium proposed in Ybor City, mm-hmm. which is real close to downtown Tampa, and that fell through. Sternberg one of the reasons was he wanted too much public money, and the folks in Tampa, the Hillsborough County commissioners and the leadership in that county, they weren't going to go for it. So that kind of killed that idea. And since then, there's been no talk of building a new stadium anywhere much in Tampa. So we got a new mayor now in Tampa, Jane Castor. She's the new mayor, and she's been talking with the Rays, Stuart Sternberg, and the front office. And supposedly she's okay with the idea of a split city deal, half the season in Tampa, half the season in Montreal. The talks are preliminary right now, so we'll see where it ends up. But it's interesting. Sternberg did go on record yesterday. He was asked what would it take to keep the team in Tampa and play full season in Tampa. And he says, number one, there would just have to be a massive increase in attendance. I think the average attendance for Major League Baseball was 28, maybe 29,000 last year. And he would think that the Rays would have to average 28 to 29,000 folks a game at Tropicana Field, which they have never done outside of that first season in 98 when they drew 30,000. That was the first season of Rays baseball. So, he's not completely closed off the idea of baseball full-time in Tampa, but he thinks the split city concept is the only way that Major League Baseball stays in Tampa for the long term.
Yeah, we'll have to see. When was it proposed for? Was it like 2022?
No, the Rays are going to play into Trop through 2027.
27. Oh, yeah,
through 27.
Okay.
But in order for new stadiums to be built, they would have to know by 2023, 2024. So there's got to be a time frame and some parameters put on that for the new stadium to be built, all the infrastructure, those kind of things ready to go for the new stadium. So there is a deadline, but the Rays are contractually bound to the Tropicana field through 2027. And if they leave early, it's a huge, huge payout that they have to pay the city of St. Petersburg. So,
Okay. Yeah, so we pretty much covered it all for that race. So, I don't know what else you want to mention or go over about the Rays.
well, the one area that I think we probably need to talk about briefly is the bullpen. The Rays did trade their closer from last season, Emilio Pagan, just a couple of weeks ago to San Diego. Kind of a shock. Pagan really was instrumental in helping the Rays reach that wild card game down the stretch. I mean, he was lights out in September, pitched very well, led the team with 20 saves, and the Rays dealt him to San Diego. They picked up Manuel Margot, a very good defensive center fielder, but the Rays already have Gold Glove winner Kevin Kiermaier in center. So Margot will probably spot start and be a fill-in the outfield. But with the loss of Pagan, that means the Rays are probably going to go to a closer by committee approach to start the season. And I'm not a big fan of that. They tried it last year at the beginning of the season and did not have very good results. Diego Castillo, Chaz Rowe, Jose Alvarado, those are the guys that kind of were in that spot as situational closers. Castillo one night, Alvarado the next. And Alvarado, I mean, he just imploded. Now, he had a lot of personal issues going on off the field with his folks. The parents are now out of Venezuela. They're in the States. So he said that, he feels much better and he's ready to go. But just listening to the comments from Kevin Cash out of spring training, I would expect the Rays to go with a closer by committee approach to start the season until somebody proves that, they can handle that position and take hold of it.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense for them, I think. That's definitely where I see them going. And, they, like you said, their bullpen with as you mentioned earlier, Nick Anderson, too, the addition of him is going to be big for their bullpen, too. He's going to be a huge piece. So definitely have a lot of pieces there they can work with.
Yeah, they do. And Anderson was the main setup guy last year when they acquired him from Miami. I mean, he did start maybe one game, but primarily he was used in the 7th and 8th innings to, set up Pagan and worked really well. Now, whether he's ready to assume the closer role this year, you don't know. I'm sure he'll get a shot, in spring training and probably, during the early part of the season, they'll throw him out there, see what he's got. But at this point, there really is no set closer right now on the Rays team.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, I guess that's about it, though, for the Rays this year. I think, as mentioned, they're going to be in that race for the American League East, and we both think they're going to fall a little short. But they're still going to make, we both said, still going to, they're going to make the first wild card game. So that's definitely going to be an exciting season this year, I think, for a lot of teams. A lot of teams are going to be in the hunt throughout the season, and a lot of teams made moves. As mentioned with the White Sox and all these other teams too, like in the National. If you talk about the National League National League is going to be even more packed than the American League. Is going to be pretty much every team in the National League is going to be in the hunt except for like 3 or 4 teams. So it's going to be a good season. I think it's going to be fun to watch, and especially with the Astros too. It's seeing what happens with them and like all these. Probably going to be a lot of brawls, hit batters, all this other stuff.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and I think the commissioner's trying to nip some of that in the bud. He issued that memo, I believe yesterday or the day before, saying, we really got to cut down on the amount of bean balls this season. We really can't be throwing at guys.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to do what he can to kind of stop that before it gets started, so to speak. But the Astros will they'll be competitive, but I don't think that they'll win the West, and then I don't think they'll get a playoff spot. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So it's gonna be a good year, and now we just have 7 more episodes to go in the series. So yeah, 7 more teams. So getting close to finishing it up, and then going on talking about more stuff as the season gets closer. Spring training games start this weekend, so that would be exciting to see some of these guys play, and so especially some of the younger guys like the non-roster invitees that on a lot of these teams, the big prospects. So yeah, so keep an eye out for the more episodes, and as all these episodes are going to be on every podcast platform. Check them all out. And yeah, the next one will be, I think, Phillies. I'm going to be recording Phillies soon with Matt Bishop from the Score Pro. So yeah, make sure you can check out all the articles on our site as well. So, and just a reminder, you can never have too much pod tar.